It's actually, if you know the right tools and you are in an industry where there is not that much outreach happening, which I would say the construction industry definitely falls under, it's actually too easy at the moment. Like you could literally call the CEO of every single large general contractor in UK today on his mobile phone. And then like this is stuff that people are often not aware of, but that's what and then there are like 20 seconds that matter. Like either that person will decide that you're a huge waste of time and be angry, or
what do you say? Somehow... Curious. So like a CEO of like a multi-billion-pound contractor, what's the first how do you hack how do you get over that first 10 seconds or so?
So first thing is like, hey,
do you want to make more money?
So what I hate really is like, if like, hey, Owen, how are you doing today?
Yeah,
like
no
then you already know it's a salesperson, and it's like, you're interrupting my day. Like you don't care about how I'm doing, so fuck off. And so the first thing you say is, hey, Owen, my name is Paul, I'm co-founder of Building Radar. And then the first thing is you tell them what you want. So I'm calling you to book a short meeting with you. Because the first thing, if somebody calls you out of the blue, is this flight reflex. When you walk into a store and the sales guy comes up and say, hey, can I help you? And everyone's like, no, I'm good. Although you may be searching. So first thing, you didn't run into my wife's car. I don't want to sell you insurance. I just want to book a 10-minute meeting with you. And then it's like,
what's that about?
Exactly. So why? So we're an AI company that helps companies in the construction industry to win more construction projects. We work with your competitor XY. And my goal would be to take 10 minutes with you to evaluate if this is also relevant for your company.
Which country seems to have the most sophisticated way of sales and marketing?
So in the US, there's just obviously like more sales is more of a culture. Like in Europe, especially in Germany, but also in the UK, it's often something regarded negatively.
Yeah.
I cannot just call somebody, like, that's crazy. What are they going to think?
Yeah.
And this is just something that I'm always amazed when I'm in the US, how much more it is part of their culture, and also how much more even like companies that here would be like a mom and pop shop really have like way more sophisticated CRM systems and really get this idea of lead generation and booking meetings, etc. So in that sense, I would say definitely the US.
What was the biggest mistake on your journey? Or maybe
I think we're gonna need another 2 hours for that.
The biggest, or you can give two or three, like whatever you want. And what did you learn?
So by far the biggest one is, to be honest, like we started right out of university, and then we really just did like the startup playground for the first 2 or 3 years, like basically taking part in any pitch competition that's out there, raising money, creating fancy pitch decks. Like at some point we integrated satellite images in our platform because the European Space Agency had this big competition that we actually ended up winning.
Oh, wow.
And like never really, like, it sounds really bad, but I'm just gonna be very vulnerable here. So without really caring about the customer, like, it was like, if we would have known about blockchain back then, we would have found a way to integrate blockchain. And it really, like, it sounds really, really bad, and I feel somewhat ashamed, but
opportunist,
like, not caring about the users and the customers enough in the beginning, and just really about creating this fancy story is definitely something, like, if we would do it again, would save us like 3 years of the journey. And I that's definitely the biggest one.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Groundbreakers, where we reveal the stories behind the most successful founders and operators in AEC technology, from exits in the multiple hundreds of millions through to the struggles of building in a resilient industry. We've got you covered. Before we get started though, if you're a startup founder or operator responsible for innovation in your company, or you want a deeper, more insightful look into technology in AEC, you won't want to miss our newsletter. From deep dives into particular technologies such as AI, robotics, design, software, and so on. Hot takes from investors betting big in AEC technology, and advice on building tech companies, including the stories and takeaways of the most successful AEC technology founders. Head over to www.bricks buildingradar-bytes.com and sign up today to get this exclusive material straight to your inbox. And now for the episode.
Building Radar, welcome. It's actually the second person from Building Radar we had on this podcast, but I think the first one was Anthony. We didn't talk a great deal about Building Radar, so today that is the plan of action. How's it going over? You're in Munich, right?
Yeah, over here in Munich. And yeah, we just come out of the BAU trade show that happened here 2 weeks ago. So have a very busy start of the week behind of us.
Was it a success for you?
Yep. Like for us, we sell to building product manufacturers and we want to talk to their heads of sales and marketing leaders, and basically 2,000 companies come to Munich and line up in a row and bring their salespeople. So for us, that's the perfect territory to meet our customers.
Wow. Okay. So could you tell us then, what does Building Radar do?
So at Building Radar, we help companies in the construction industry to win the best construction projects. And we do this by basically cleaning up the whole top of the funnel of their sales process. So we started out as a lead generation provider 10 years ago, actually, in London, right out of our master degree. And over time, we developed the software around these leads because we realized that most construction companies or building product manufacturers come out of a very reactive past when you look at how their sales processes work. So they mainly reply to tenders, to RFQs, etc., and do not a whole lot of proactive outreach. So if you look at the sales pipeline as this funnel, then usually they're missing the upper half of that funnel. And that's why we first built a software around our leads, but then over time, companies also started to upload their own data and now are also ingesting their inbound leads, their tender documents, their specification documents into our platform to have our AI help them to bring it to the level of maturity that they can move it into their own system, which is usually a CRM system. And we do this with like a mid 3-digit number of large and medium-sized building product manufacturers mainly. So very large ones would be companies like Holcim or Bosch Security Systems or Schindler Elevators. But we also have medium-sized family-run businesses and general contractors as our customers.
So you basically give them an access to a software which has data of projects for which they can supply materials to?
Correct, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then what happens? So they're able to send a proposal or something for that project, or get the contact details. Like how does it work?
Yeah, where's the
there?
interaction between the project owner and then the material provider?
So the thing is, project sales is actually a very complex process because imagine you're selling elevators and somebody is building a hospital. First of all, that's like an amazing, compelling event to reach out because like there will 100% there will be elevators in that building. So in the sense of like how mature such a lead is, it's much better than what many other industries can actually buy. And it's always like going to be 6, 7, 8-digit deal sizes. So it's actually very large revenue numbers that our customers can make. And what makes project sales very complicated is that the buying center consists of not only several people. So B2B sales in general is obviously more complicated than B2C because you have to understand who's the decision maker, who's the champion, who's the buyer, whatever. But in project sales around a construction project, that buying center actually consists of several companies. So it could be that you convince the investor of your solution because you have the most energy efficient elevators and they are really into like building a sustainable building. But then you still have the architect who might have other ideas and his design or her design might not fit with your product. And then even if you convince the architect, at the end, there will still be a contractor. And especially with products that maybe don't have very strong USPs, you can still be kicked out like maybe 1.5 years after your first customer interaction if you don't understand the process on when you need to have these interactions with the different stakeholders. And this is why, especially if this process happens in people's heads or in Excel spreadsheets, it's very hard for companies to understand what are the value propositions that really resonate with the different stakeholders. And this is something that we create transparency for and like support the users to know when do we need to reach out to whom with which value proposition in order to bring that project on the right trajectory as early as possible, but then also not dropping the ball over time when the project develops.
Hey listeners, I want to take a quick break to remind you about the Bricks and Bytes newsletter. If you're interested in learning about the technology shaping the future of construction, you won't want to miss the valuable insights we share each week. To get this exclusive content delivered straight to your inbox, head over to www.bricks-bytes.com and sign up today. Link is in the show notes. Back to the show.
I got some experience in dealing with, here in the UK, Glenningan and Barbour ABI. So these work that you've got repository, I think is the word, of the projects, and then you pick up like what you're interested in, what you think you are interested in, what you think will need your services. In my case, it's engineering, and then you try to reach out to an architect or developer or whoever it is. It seems like your way of doing it is more targeted. So you're not guessing who is the decision maker for my services, but it is kind of more clear path from me to the person I'm trying to sell to.
So basically in every country around the world, you have like these databases for construction projects that have been around for decades. I think the oldest one is a company called Dodge in the US. I think they were founded in 1890 something, with a guy riding around Manhattan and basically noting down the upcoming construction projects on his bike. And these companies, they usually do a very good job when it comes to the data. So they have like manual research teams mainly who call up architects, investors, etc. The problem is with these like long sales cycles, because you like selling elevators into a large building is a sales cycle of like 1.5 to 2 years. With these long sales cycles and these processes very often not happening in CRM systems, but really just in people's guts or minds, it's very hard. Like very few companies actually achieve to measure what they get out of these databases. So it is really less about only the data. It's really more about what do you do with the data and measuring what's working and what's not working. And this is really, especially in Europe, like most countries come out of like 10, 15 years of absolute construction boom. So sales for many companies meant basically picking up the phone whenever it's ringing. And now they have to really learn this proactive approach again, and just buying the leads, at least from what we've seen, is often not enough, because if you're not like having the right processes in place, not the right team set up, no real understanding of when's the best time to get involved, etc., that can be also very frustrating. And these data providers, they tend to have pretty high churn rates, so they lose like between 15 and 20% of the customers every year, and not because they have bad data, but because so many companies are so bad at measuring what they get out of the data, and then every other year they will basically switch the data provider because the grass is always greener on the other side. And we actually don't see these companies as competitors. We say like you can even combine their data, you can ingest their data into our platform, because nobody knows about every construction project at every point in time. And it's really way more about like funneling them through the right processes.
Okay. How easy or difficult is it to use Building Radar in terms of, do you need like additional person, or how difficult is it for a team to start like
to use it?
Start using it, yeah.
So it obviously depends of the team setup and also of the solution that you're providing, your maturity in the market, etc. But basically, like we always like to compare this to a production line, and it's actually very easy. Like you need to define what your raw materials are, which is like normally in sales it would be called like the ideal customer profile. So we want to understand what kind of building, what kind of contact person do I need, so that I feel confident that this is somebody who also gets value out of me reaching out right now. So if I sell white paint and I want to target the investor like 3 years before groundbreaking, this person will tell me, hey man, no offense, but I couldn't care less what's like who's going to paint the walls in 3 years. But if you actually do have like, you're a GC who can do turnkey construction, and you can actually save that person time or money, and they might be very interested to talking to you at that point in time. So it's really, the first thing is understanding not who do I want to talk to, but what's my value proposition for the other side. And then it is about structuring your sales process. And this, to be honest, is something that is like really crazy how bad many also very large companies in the construction industry understand their sales processes, because again, they didn't have to do this for a very long time, that they really proactively go out in the market. And secondly, many of these decisions are also moving to earlier stakeholders in the moment. So because there is more pre-construction, there is more digital planning, there's higher requirements in terms of sustainability, etc. Suddenly, it might not be the contractor with whom I've been working for the last 2 decades. Suddenly, it might be the architect or the guy at the real estate department of Amazon who decides what kind of concrete will be used in that data center, for example, because they're trying to build a CO2 neutral data center. So there's lots of shift happening right now in who is taking these decisions. And this is really changing how also the sales teams need to operate and how their processes need to be structured. And then the third part, so defining what's the input, defining my production line. And the third part is defining who should take care of which parts of that production process. And in basically many industries, except the construction industry, you have this division of labor and sales. Like both of you probably also get like lots of marketing emails. They're usually sent from these sales development representatives. And if you agree to take a meeting with them, they actually don't take the meeting. They bring their account executive, who is then the person who's supposed to sell you this product. And the reason why they do this is because it's completely different skill sets to book meetings and to close deals. For the first role, you want to have a junior person who basically doesn't have any excuses. They can't say, I went to the trade show last week and this week I'm super busy, because then you're obviously not going to do this. So, and this is something that also, which is quite interesting, that the construction industry, for like 95% of the companies that we talk to, they are lacking this division of labor. Again, because they didn't do a lot of that proactive sales in the past. And they rely a lot on their existing customers, people who they did business with in the past. And there you obviously don't need that role. But if you really want to grow, or if you want to grow into new customer segments, new markets, etc., then at least in our humble experience, it is really important to also have the right team set up, because a very interesting lead for a company can be not mature enough for the field salesperson who's only used to taking meetings with contractors, for example. So in our opinion, it's very easy. It's just a couple of things you have to get right. But a lot of companies struggle because it's not their day to day, and they've been working very differently in the past.
Yeah. Do you sometimes find yourself, or someone from your team find themselves like trying to explain the marketing to people, like how they should be approaching it, rather than doing it like they've always been doing it?
Yeah, so basically working with us always starts with we call this proof of concept month. And like we don't like to call it that way, but at the end of the day, it's a mini consulting project, because if you don't have the right sales processes, there's no point in buying leads. Like it will always be like a marketing expense, like your billboard. And like, obviously there is some return for a billboard, but nobody can measure it. There's this famous quote, I think by Ford, who said like he knows half of his marketing money is wasted, but he doesn't know which half it is.
I love that.
And that's
never heard that one.
That's why most of these companies, they treat the money they spend for Barber ABI or something, they know there is return out of that, and it's like 20 grand. It's not crazy. But they never know like their conversion rates, how many of these projects actually make it into the quotation phase, how many do then actually get won or lost. And if you don't have a setup like this, it's just very hard to really scale this and make it repeatable.
Sounds like you're describing my approach to getting leads.
Which is fair. I mean, it works. There is still billboards around. But the cool thing is, like, again, in the construction industry, you have this amazing lead. Like somebody is building a building. Obviously, there are going to be roof tiles in that project. There are going to be stairs in it. There's going to be bathrooms in that building. So you have this great compelling event that like somebody's going to spend 10 million pounds on a building here, and I sell building products. So that's just a very, very good lead in that, like in that theory of how mature a piece of information is to reach out to a customer.
Yeah, I like it. It's more precise. Has it always been the point to structure this in this way since 2015, or has your product journey evolved?
No, we distinguish like 3 different stages. The first one was really just the data part. So the funding story of Building Radar is basically I had a student job researching construction projects for the world's largest modular carpet manufacturer. So I like met
Super
their
exciting.
international head of sales just by chance, and then I spent a year in China after high school. So I had a bunch of Chinese students who were always doing manual research and basically creating spreadsheets for that company. And my co-founder Leo used to work for Google when we started our master's degree in London. And then at some point we had the idea, why don't we automatize this manual research with back then very stupid crawlers, basically, who go to a website and see if anything changed there. And this is like what we like to call Building Radar 1.0 now. And you could say this is a digital version of the Barber ABIs and the Glenigans and the Dodges and the likes. And then what we like to call Building Radar 2.0 is when we build that process around this. And then with like Gen AI started to also build more and more, we like to call it enablement functionalities, where we say you don't need to write every email by yourself. You don't need to research every contact person by yourself. You don't need to read every specification document, like all the 50 pages from the beginning to the end, because this is, we all know, like even the free version of ChatGPT can do an amazing job in many of these tasks. So we started to add more and more of these enablement functionalities on top. And Building Radar 3.0 is what we started mid last year. It's really now we allow companies to bring their own data, and they suddenly actually start uploading data they might get from Glenigan or from Barber ABI or from some other sources into our platform, because they want to use the same enablement functionalities. They want to use the same processes and then hand the data over to their CRM through our API. So it really evolved over time into this like now solution, or we like to call it digital sales agent for the upper part of your sales funnel.
What's the future?
It's a very good question. So one discussion that pops up once a year here at Building Radar when we have our company offsites and had a few pints is like, why don't we turn this into a marketplace? So now we have like the 3 biggest facade manufacturers as our customers. Now it would actually make sense to go to the architect or to somebody on the other side and say, why don't you actually bring that project on our platform? And the guys are going to reach out to you anyway in the next couple of weeks. Until now, to be honest, we've always decided against that because it's a completely different play. It's a completely different business model, etc. But there is definitely something there to combine that ecosystem. And then, like in general, our ambition is to really make this transaction in the construction industry more and more efficient. Like we really, and this is I think where engineer that you talk to gets very passionate, is like there are not the best buildings being built at the moment because people are just doing what they always did. So there is a really flawed way how products and services are allocated to construction projects, because the specifiers, they don't know about the most efficient solutions. They don't know about the newest energy efficient facade that some provider maybe just launched last year or something. So we really want to make sure every building gets the best solutions that are out there, and by basically making it more and more efficient to match the building product manufacturers and the solution providers with the demand side, basically the investors, architects, etc.
So Paul, before we started, I had maybe a different perception of what you guys did. So you're actually managing like the entire sales process for these companies. It's not just like a matter of you guys providing data on available projects that people can sell into.
We handle it until they can hand it over to their own system. And you will be surprised, like there are companies who spend like dozens of millions of euros on Salesforce every year, but their Salesforce basically is a tool to manage their quotations, and everything else is just happening offline or between people's ears. And we just, we have no intention to replace the CRM system, because we know we're never going to replace like Salesforce within Siemens. And we also don't want to get involved in all that messy connecting it to the ERPs and this kind of stuff. But we want to take care of that upper part of the funnel. And that, depending on how the company is set up, is like, if you would compare it to a software company, they are lacking like between 50 and 70% of their whole sales process is just not happening in a digital system.
Yeah. So what's different between like the data on something like Building Radar's platform versus something like Glenigan? Because Glenigan just is like, as far as you mentioned it earlier, probably people are probably calling up architects, scraping local locality, the databases and whatnot, and seeing what's in there. Is there something like more than that Building Radar provides?
So I think we are still like these companies, they are more like traditional research companies or like publishing houses. This is where they usually all come from. So I would say when it comes to getting the most accurate data from the internet, then we usually, like if you compare the data, we tend to be earlier. So we usually find the projects earlier, but our data is also like a little bit more raw. So you would be the first one to reach out to that project most likely, but you might have to do this additional phone call because it is about being there first and not getting a ready-made data sheet that is sent out to 10,000 customers at the same time. Like for us, it's really way more about very individual filters that also reflect what a company is good at, and not so much about like researching the perfect data sheet on every single. We don't believe a lot in databases because they are just very easily outdated. We are really more about like getting you the most accurate data from the internet at a certain moment in time.
How is it a secret to tell us like how you do that or not really?
It's actually like it's like the good thing I'm just the stupid sales guy. So if there were any secrets, you could torture me and tell them to you. But in general, it's a combination of our own like crawlers that we have for some sites, and we have some aggregators, and then now we're also integrating like solutions like Perplexity, etc. in there. So we don't care about like if it's our own technology or whatever. We just care about, is this the best outcome for the user? And we've invested a lot of time in stuff like merging, for example. So understanding when 10 different sources report about the same construction project at the same point in time or different points in time, to understand that this is the same project. That's not even trivial for a human. And this is something where we have very powerful systems that we build on our own. But for others, like to get all the public tenders or something out, that's actually very easy. Like everybody can write these kind of crawlers. There it might be, again, more about filtering them in a smart way, etc. But really, again, the data is really, in our opinion, not even the biggest differentiator anymore. It's really about combining it with what a customer does with the data over time and recognizing the patterns, like what's the stuff that's working well and what's the stuff that's maybe a waste of time.
Okay, simple. So what are like sales teams within these building? You say your most customers building material suppliers, right?
Yeah.
So what are the biggest waste of times you see within these companies and their sales process?
So number one is really manually reviewing like these specification documents and requests that they get. Yeah. Number two, manual data entry into the CRM, or not manual data entry in the CRM, and then just always finding the data in your email inboxes. So it's just like the amount of knowledge that is not in the systems that these companies spend a lot of money for is really surprisingly high, and that's leading to many inefficiencies. And then the third one I would say is really about outreach, where like researching the right people, getting the right contact data, doing the first outreach is really something that can also be, like, it shouldn't be done solely by AI, but it can be supported a lot by AI in our opinion.
Very interesting.
Do you have a knowledge perhaps of like which material would have the longest and the shortest sales cycle?
That's a very good.
Yeah.
Paint.
Material component.
Come on. He said it. Paint. The last thing to go in, surely. Like
paint. Now, like the thing is, there is two ways how you can go about it. So you can wait until something's up for tender, and then this will usually have a very short sales cycle, but it will also have a lower conversion rate and a lower margin most of the times, because somebody is just trying to get the cheapest offer, basically. That's the idea of a tender, right? And then there is this part, like the Americans call it spec making or spec breaking. And the spec making bit is where you actually try to have a long sales cycle, because you get involved early and you convince somebody of certain USPs of your solution. And if you then end up being more or less the only one who can supply that, then it is pretty much impossible for anybody else to break that. So you invested much more time and effort, but that will result. So yeah, there's basically these two ways how you can go about it. So you can wait until something is up for tender, which will usually result in lower margins and faster sales cycles. Or you can say, I want to get involved very early actually and convince somebody of like the USPs of my solution, which will then mean the sales cycle will be longer, but you should have a much higher conversion rate and higher margins at the end of the day. So the most easy to understand example is actually in the elevator area. So elevators is the most cutthroat business ever. There's 4 companies out there. I think they get sued every other year because they talk about prices.
Really?
And now there was this big scandal like 10 years ago or something, but there's Kone, Otis, ThyssenKrupp and Schindler, and they, I don't know, in Europe they own, I think, 80% of the market or so. So for them, it's really tough to do spec breaking, like to wait until the very end, because somebody will just compare 4 more or less similar products and then go for the cheapest one. So ThyssenKrupp, for example, they're called TKE now. They have one elevator where 2 elevators run in one shaft. So they can actually go to a developer in the London city center and say, hey, with this solution, you can actually save 10 square meters per floor, and that's like real ROI, money in the London city center. And then if in a tender it's specified that there's this elevator where 2 elevators are running in one shaft, you don't need to name any product name or company name. Everybody who sees that knows there's only this one company who can basically win this. And there are like certain, like this more or less exists in every segment, not always as obvious as this one, but everybody's trying to get in some of their unique value propositions into these projects and then to make it harder for the other ones to basically break it at the very end. So to your question, Martin, it depends. Like there is really just commodity products, but even there, some companies are actually doing a pretty good job at turning commodity products into solutions. Yeah. So one example I like there, for example, when I moved into my apartment here in Munich, the owner of the building, he pitched us that they have these, like, you know, these gypsum things behind the paint, and they're made from Saint-Gobain. They're called Habito, and you can actually directly put like nails and screws into them. Like you don't need to drill holes anymore. Mm-hmm. And now suddenly, like absolute commodity product is something where the building owner pitches to the tenant that this is some special wall products, because I actually love it, because I used to live in an old building before, and like hanging up pictures, there was a nightmare there. And this is just one example how somebody turned like a commodity product into a solution that you can now suddenly talk to somebody like a building owner. Or if you take the concrete industry, like concrete is pretty much the biggest commodity ever, like ready-mix concrete. But now suddenly the big players like Holcim or Heidelberg Materials, they spend a lot of effort to create, for example, carbon reduced concrete, because we all know like concrete and cement are, I think, responsible for 7 or 8% of the worldwide CO2 emissions. So they now buy up old bridges, grind them up again, and create recycled concrete. And this is also a way where you can now suddenly go to an architect who's planning a building that needs to get a LEED Platinum certification, and has, for the first time in their history, basically has things to talk to these stakeholders about that they always didn't have in the past. So that this is really, really interesting how this race to the early stakeholders is happening at the moment.
Yeah, I get the point. So everyone is making up some marketing headlines for which is,
it's actually really creative. I like it.
Yeah, I absolutely hate that, because usually these are very not relevant pain points that are being solved, and the hype around it is like, oh my god, this is like rocket science.
You gotta make sales, man. Come on.
I would say it depends. Like there are some that are like, in the concrete example, I think it's very relevant. Then there are others where, yeah, if your like faucet is made of recycled aluminum, that's like 0.00001 of the building footprint or something, that's probably a little bit less relevant. But I would say it depends.
Yeah, exactly.
There are some really cool solutions, and everybody knows, like with AI, to be honest, like the decisions which product's gonna be used, this is all moving to the earlier stages, because like it also doesn't take like crazy amount of creativity to think like who's doing an architect's job in 5 years time. So if I'm a building owner and say, hey, plan me this building and I want to focus on high-end design and I don't know, cost saving, go plan this for me. This is not like absolutely crazy, I think, to imagine something like that happening in the near future.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, so you have a view on building materials manufacturers in different geographies, Europe, UK, US. I don't know if you are in Australia as well.
We have a couple of clients there.
Yes. Which country seems to have the most sophisticated way of sales and marketing?
So in the US, there's just obviously like more sales is more of a culture. Like in Europe, especially in Germany, but also in the UK, it's often something regarded negatively.
Yeah.
I cannot just call somebody, like that's crazy. What are they going to think?
Yeah.
And this is just something that I'm always amazed when I'm in the US, how much more it is part of their culture, and also how much more even like companies that here would be like a mom and pop shop really have like way more sophisticated CRM systems and really get this idea of lead generation and booking meetings, etc. So in that sense, I would say definitely the US. When it comes to the sophistication, how buildings are being built and how this whole specification process works, I think the UK is actually pretty advanced. So the topics that general contractors or architects care about, I would say they are like probably the most advanced if you want to see like reducing footprints and stuff like that as advanced. So it's really interesting to see the different, also in the way like people build, like in the random building is somewhere in the middle of the US, there's not much specification to do, if we're honest, because the buildings all look more or less the same. And yeah, so it really depends on the geographies and on the product lines, I would say, but it is definitely obvious that there are large cultural differences in there.
Yeah, I always remember my friend who works in sales. He sells globally, but based in the UK, he says the two hardest people to sell to are British and German people.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. So Paul, how does I would like to cover actually two things. One, how is Build and Radar implemented for people? Like, is it just a use? Is it like a plug and play approach with people doing a little bit more onboarding? I think you mentioned that your first month is, I can't remember the term you used, but you work with people for a period up front before they're actually on the system or whatever that is. Yeah, so let's go down there.
So yeah, we call it a proof of concept phase where we we first do the process homework. So we say like, how does the production line look like? What's the input you want to get, and how are you going to measure if you're successful or not? Because again, if we have sales cycles of 1.5 years, you don't want to wait 1.5 years to understand if the right things are happening there or not. And then we basically fill this with 1 month of usage where the companies should be able to prove 3 things. Like one, they get an idea of what's the kind of data that we pick up and that we find for them. Number 2, how much of the data is currently unknown to them and relevant for them. And number 3, how often are their salespeople then actually successful in reaching out and in reaching their target contacts and booking meetings with them. And then in terms of technical implementation, it's actually very simple. So we have integrations into all the big CRM systems. So if it's like Salesforce, Microsoft Dynamics, SAP, HubSpot, etc., we just integrate with these systems to make sure that it's a seamless digital process and the data can flow from one system to another without any manual input needed.
Very good. Sounds pretty straightforward. So yeah, what's the revenue model? Like, how do you guys charge?
So I'm pretty sure it's not the final evolution because we really are trying to get closer and closer to the actual value that we generate. So there's probably also read many articles that it will be way more about outcome-based models rather than just software as a service. And we believe generating revenue is a very good model that you can do somehow outcome related. But at the moment, it's a combination of the geography that a customer covers with us and the number of users and the number of different teams that work on our platform. But we do have some contracts where it's also success-based, where we set certain milestones and say if it's generating 10 million in additional revenue, then it's going to cost less. And if it's generating 30, then it's going to be more expensive.
Thinking about the outcome, are you thinking about the percentage of the outcome or some other?
That would be the ideal way. There are some
most hated way.
There are some caveats there because you're basically not aligning your incentives. The customer would have an incentive not to tell you when they win something. Another problem involved is often they don't even know if they end up winning the job or not because they hand the project to some distributor who then maybe buys their products or not. And so it's not super straightforward, but for us, it's really, really important to make it measurable. Like we have this BHAG, this big, hairy, audacious goal that in 2027, we want to prove that we generated 10 billion euro in additional revenue for our customers. So we really care a lot about making it visible and seeing what's the actual ROI for our customers. And very often our leads are the first lead source for which they have this ROI calculation.
So can you maybe just explain or tell us an example or two of this ROI? You don't have to mention names, but maybe like was it like some million of euros that they and how they measured it also?
So again, you just really need to make sure there is no gap in the pipeline. So like an example where they are usually not able to measure it is they buy their subscription to one of these databases that we mentioned, and their sales reps, they can search these databases. If they like something, they act on it. Most often they will act on the ones where they already know somebody who's involved and maybe not act on the ones where they don't know anybody. And then if you're lucky, 6 months later, they had their meetings, they get their requests for proposals, and then they need to create a quote, and for this, they need a CRM system. And then they will put this into the CRM. They will say, lead source, my amazing network, because I'm the field sales guy for Bavaria, and I obviously know all the architects around here. And then I make my revenue. And then like this, you will not be able to track it. But if you really make sure that the handover is very smooth and you have a really clear distinction of the different phases through which this lead goes, then it's actually very easy to track it. And you just need to make sure there are regular reviews and checking where the bottlenecks are in the pipeline. And then you can actually track that, like some of our customers, they really have like high 2-digit million revenue numbers that they can generate per year through Building Radar, which is then also great for us, obviously, because they will never question the money that they have in the budget for Building Radar. They will much rather say, when can you guys finally do this in France? Because our team there also needs some support.
So right now, this tracking is not like enforced by your software, right? It's only depend on someone's willingness to track it or not?
It is more that like we set certain, we call this like phase goals. And then whenever you reach them, the project automatically moves into the next stage. So we say, like when you actually got a positive reply from a contact, it will automatically trigger you to move it into the next stage. And then whenever projects stay in the same stage for too long, they like get a flag. And this is what our customer success teams then regularly review with the customers to say, let's make sure everything is up to date and we're not missing out on anything here.
Right. Speaking about revenue, I have to ask, are you profitable? And if not, are you thinking about being?
So we were until last year. So the last 3 years, we were growing with a positive zero, I would say. And at the middle of last year, we raised some additional money because we really want to invest both into international expansion now. So we have a very strong B2B enterprise sales process, which includes like on-site client meetings and people on the ground, because our deal sizes are usually in the 6-digit ARR. And secondly, as we also talked about before the interview, I think it's really dangerous for any type of software company at the moment to really get replaced by some generative model out there. So really also heavily investing in our tech capabilities to make sure we capture that, or we're building the moats in the sense that you can't just write the command into ChatGPT 5.0 that says just do what these guys are doing, but much cheaper.
Simples. Okay, so we talk a little bit about go-to-market, an exciting strategy exciting topic for us to explore. So, yeah, you're obviously helping people with their sales strategies. So what's your sales strategy? Like, how do you get in front of your customer?
So we rely a lot on outbound. So we also have to live what we are preaching, right? So we have sales development representatives. We often actually have interns that we get out of university for 3 months. And it's actually, if you know the right tools and you are in an industry where there is not that much outreach happening, which I would say the construction industry definitely falls under, it's actually too easy at the moment. Like you could literally call the CEO of every single large general contractor in UK today on his mobile phone. And then this is stuff that people are often not aware of, but that's what and then there are 20 seconds that matter. Like either that person will decide that you're a huge waste of time and be angry, or
what do you say? Somehow... Curious. So like a CEO of a multi-billion-pound contractor, what's the first how do you hack? How do you get over that first 10 seconds or so?
So the first thing is hey,
do you want to make more money?
So what I hate really is hey, Owen, how are you doing today?
Yeah,
then you already know it's a salesperson, and it's you're interrupting my day. You don't care about how I'm doing, so fuck off. And so the first thing you say is, hey, Owen, my name is Paul, I'm co-founder of Building Radar. And then the first thing is you tell them what you want. So I'm calling you to book a short meeting with you. Because the first thing, if somebody calls you out of the blue, is this flight reflex. When you walk into a store and the sales guy comes up and say, hey, can I help you? And everyone's like, no, I'm good. Although you may be searching. So first thing, you didn't run into my wife's car. I don't want to sell you insurance. I just want to book a 10-minute meeting with you. And then it's
what's that about?
Exactly. So why? So we're an AI company that helps companies in the construction industry to win more construction projects. We work with your competitor XY. And my goal would be to take 10 minutes with you to evaluate if this is also relevant for your company.
That sounds good. How expensive is that?
What do you mean?
He's testing me now.
That never gets asked. So,
you haven't talked to me then.
That's a buying question. That's a good question. But
maybe
then,
I say Martin has proven that Polish people are not more difficult, more awkward, perhaps.
No, we just get straight to the point.
Oh, I really like that, actually. That's very effective cold call strategy. Okay, yeah, cool. So outbound, what else?
Yeah, we obviously do our bit of marketing. We do a lot of retargeting on LinkedIn and stuff like that, where you can really target people very well. Many people that we already are in touch with get retargeting from us. So they think Building Radar is everywhere, and that's actually very, very cheap to do because it's a very limited amount of people. And then we also have our own podcast formats where we talk about how we take our data that we have on the project level and they aggregate it to see how markets are being are developing. So we can see residential construction is down in southern Germany, but somehow industrial construction is picking up here and there. So just generating content for that we believe is useful for our customers. I would say these are the main channels. And then the other thing is really offline the trade shows. On the trade show, we have 10 people who really make sure every single decision maker at their booth here's a Building Radar pitch during that week.
Do you find, Paul, that there's so let me just rewind a little bit. So your target customer is building material suppliers that we've covered so far, but there are also others within that. Could you just clarify?
So we do have general contractors as well. And we have 10% of just more service companies. There can be an engineering company. There can be, we have Vodafone as a customer in Germany who is looking for new residential areas that are being developed. We have insurance companies who sell insurances to construction projects, but 60 to 70% of the ARR is large building product manufacturers.
So is there a strategy that works better for building material suppliers versus general contractor?
So the problem with general contractors is they don't have sales teams most of the time. They have the regional manager, and they're and then they're also like a lion, they catch one big giraffe and then they don't have to eat again for another 2 years.
Yeah.
So they don't have sales teams and processes in the sense of like a building product manufacturer who needs to sell thousands of smoke detectors every year in a certain region. They just need to win one big one, and then they're basically good again. We like general contractors are a little bit more complicated in our experience. They're always super interested in that, and then we do have a bunch of them as our customers, but it's very hard to convince them that you have to do sales in that way how other companies are doing it. Which is funny because they can really, I think Patrick Hellerman from Fundamental posted a cool article about that 2 days ago, that for them it's really about picking the best projects, because a general contractor, they can lose a lot of money by winning a project. So if they win the wrong one, and mostly the ones where they maybe just needed a job and then just took one that they weren't maybe 100% sure of, but just needed to get their people busy. So there is a big use case for them, but they really don't have that culture for sales at all in most of the cases, unfortunately. Which is funny because if you go to their offices, like the whole wall is full of processes, how the construction process works and how the planning process works. And then you ask them, how does your sales process works? That's the boss's job. And then the boss plays golf with the same people in the same area and stuff like that. But there is no process in a similar way on how they would approach planning a new building or something like that.
Very good. Martin, do you have any more product or go to market, or you want to go to funding?
Yeah, I just wanted to go to funding, really.
Go for it.
Yeah, so you raised 6.5 million euros recently for expansion. Can you tell us a little bit about your funding journey? And so now we know that you raised it to boost the expansion. But yeah, walk us through this.
So when we founded the company, we raised like a mid 6-digit amount and basically worked on that data product, and then we raised a Series A on that data business in 2019. And then in 2021, we basically did this pivot away from the data and really into this like building that software around it. So at that point in time, there were also some thoughts about really starting a new company because it's a very different business. There was also a lot of legacy in the cap table, etc. But A, we did have customers who were paying for that, and B, the data is still a very important part of the new company. It's not the plain vanilla unicorn cycle, I would say, where every year you just raise another huge round or something. So in the last 3 years, we basically didn't raise any money, and we're growing quite well. And now it was really time to pick up some speed.
Is the cap tag or legacy measure? Is this like perhaps hinting at giving away too much equity at the start or something like that?
No, I think considering how long we've been around and how much money we raised, we're still doing pretty well. If it would always be easier to start from scratch, but then again, it would also be too easy if you could just always design it in the way you just want it at the moment. So overall, we're actually very happy. We're also very happy with everyone who supported us from the beginning. So we literally have still our business angels from this year, 10 years ago, who are still super excited and supporting us. So overall, I'm very happy with the way things developed.
Okay. How did you choose the investors, and have you got any advice to people thinking about getting funded?
So one, they came through a mutual or befriended startup, which is always great if you have a positive reference. And number two is for us, there was a really big difference about some true international investors. There's just a really different mindset. I think this is mainly a German problem, to be honest. But the investor we took in, they're called SoCI. They're based out of London and San Francisco, and they're very small team who also work with a just very small amount of companies and are all about supporting us with the international expansion, which is really, really cool. And they're way less about the day-to-day and can I increase the salary of that engineer by 5K or something, which in the past literally sometimes were topics that took 15 minutes out of a board meeting. And they're just hey man, if you don't know what to pay your people, I won't be able to tell you that, but you please explain to me how you're going to enter the US market next year. And it's really way more bigger thinking, way more about the future. And
than trying to micromanage.
Yeah, that's not that big of a problem in London, I think, or in the UK, but in Germany it is a very big problem that like you can grow to an okay sized company without really internationalizing. So there are way less unicorns because you really can fall into this trap on just focusing on the German market compared to like a company from Sweden or Israel or something who doesn't have that domestic market in the first place, and they need to be international from day one. And this is also, unfortunately, in the heads of many of the VCs here in Germany, I think.
Interesting. I don't think we knew that, Owen.
No, that's a new insight for me too.
So supporting expansion, how do investors help support the expansion? Is it introductions or is it kind of quote unquote coaching on how this should be done? Like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say it's mainly introductions, but really the good ones, like where this guy or this person had exactly the same problem. They solved this and that, like really like this very big network and this ability to recognize the patterns and put you in contact with the right people. I would say that's a very, very, and then also they've just seen so many cases and they can tell you very often like what's highly unlikely to work and what's very likely to work. And so one thing they told us, for example, like they never seen a company that's able to sell 6-digit tickets in like 3 different continents and then reaching basically the end of their market. Like it would be the biggest coincidence ever that this is not something you can now really scale up. And like these kind of things where you really hear it from somebody who's talking to hundreds of companies per year. That's just been proven very helpful for us.
So do you, regarding expansion, do you think you need to have a team in every place you sell? That's part of the question. And another one is, what are your targets? Like, for example, a year from now, you want to have, let's say, I'm completely guessing 20% of the business in the US, 10% in UK. How do you think about this?
So this year is still mainly about the UK because we really want to prove that it's like we can build on-site sales teams in another market. And then next year will be much more about the US. But that being said, we are like winning customers in the US at the moment, and this is just mainly us flying there at the moment for the like the proof of concept phases, etc. But over time, we definitely have people on the ground in both areas. Yeah.
Good. For capital allocation, what's your? So my question was. Sorry, I'm just thinking about this whilst I ask.
How? I know.
No, it was going to be no. It was going to be around the question of
how do you allocate resources?
That was going to be it, but then I thought that was a little bit too lame to ask. So the question was going to be, like, how do things change when you're going in and you're saying, right, we need 6.5 million euros. That was the right number, right? Yeah, to start with. Versus, so you're planning this for like however many months beforehand, and you say we think we need 6.5 million euros to do this, but the money lands in your bank and maybe something changes, or perhaps it wasn't actually 6.5 million euros that you needed. So how do you think about like planning for the capital that you need and then actually implementing it once it's in your bank?
He's asking how a German deals with uncertainty.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe I should have just said that.
Yeah, I mean, everybody who is in this game and who's like not a liar, I would say, knows that all of these plans that you get presented, they have a certain level of like guesswork in them. Otherwise, you would just go to a bank and get a loan and not get a VC and give them 20% of your shares. And again, here you can really see the differences of VCs as well. Like some of them, they just say, okay, we all know how this works, and just like tell us how much you roughly need, and then we'll take it from there. And others are like, okay, but your numbers in Q4 2029, they look a little bit off. And then then you spend like an hour talking about some Excel models that were created the evening before. So it's all about like finding channels that work, like where you can really say, if I put in like £5 on the top, I get out £5 in ARR like 6 months later. If you can find something like that, then every VC will try to give you as much money as possible. Like they they have like full bank accounts, and they need companies to be able to deploy the money. And it's really all about finding that funnel that works for you, where you can say, I can really prove to you I've done this in 2 countries now, according to this playbook, and now you give me the next 20 million to do it in this region or in this segment or something like that. So it's really about proving that you have a process that's working and scalable. And then it is really more about also like time risk allocation. Like you can raise less money and say, we know we're going to raise again sooner, but with like twice the revenue, and then it's going to be much cheaper for us. Or you can say, I want to allow some margin of error because I might not be sure I really hit that channel in the next 3 months, and I'd rather have 18 months of money in the bank. And then that's really a question of how much risk you want to take. And that's because you see these companies now again popping up. They raise their Series A, and then a month later they raise like 3 times the money in the Series B. And like, you can't tell me that was their initial plan.
Yeah.
It's just like also a lot of opportunism often involved, which is totally fair. And there are these stories of the startups that raise around with a big famous fund, and then all the other ones, they follow them and they send them like blanco term sheets where you can basically write in your own evaluations. And like, it's funny like that on every level of capital deployment, how much also like herd thinking, etc., is involved.
We'll see in 5 years where they are.
I could guess that that's not happening necessarily so much this side of the big pond that separates us on another large continent. Paul, who are some of your biggest business mentors?
Oh, I just wanted to hit on a similar question. Your role models regarding expansion.
Yeah.
It can be people or companies.
And you can't say Martin.
Okay, now I have to think again.
I'm closing my eyes.
So like one company that we really admire is HubSpot, because what they did, we do see some similarities where they started out with that basically marketing automation, and then built a whole CRM system around it. And we went through a similar process. Like, we always used to be on Salesforce, and like our whole sales team had licenses. And then our head of marketing, like 5 years ago, introduced HubSpot. And just by being way more intuitive and just somehow much easier to use, it basically grabbed the whole sales process. And I think we now have like 1 license left in Salesforce, where our accounting basically manages our billings, etc., and everything else moved onto HubSpot. And as like we talked about earlier, like many of the construction companies, they really only understand the lower end of their funnel. We really do see a very big opportunity to add value on that upper end of the funnel without replacing the existing systems, but basically just filling that void. So this is one company that we really admire.
Yeah, I like this term you keep using about the top of the funnel in construction, and it's almost like you said, because we work in construction, right? And I can completely see it, like having very little disregard for top of funnel, right, as a construction company. But no one had ever explained it in such a way that you have, which I find very interesting. Martin, do you have a question?
Yeah, the last one from me would be about mistakes. What was the biggest mistake on your journey? Or maybe
I think we're gonna need another 2 hours for that.
The biggest, or two, you can give two or three, like whatever you want. And what did you learn?
So by far the biggest one is, to be honest, like we started right out of university, and then we really just did like the startup playground for the first 2 or 3 years, like basically taking part in any pitch competition that's out there, raising money, creating fancy pitch decks. Like at some point we integrated satellite images in our platform because the European Space Agency had this big competition that we actually ended up winning.
Oh, wow.
And like never really, like it sounds really bad, but I'm just gonna be very vulnerable here. So without really caring about the customer, like it was like if we would have known about blockchain back then, we would have found a way to integrate blockchain. And it really like it sounds really really bad, and I feel somewhat ashamed. But
opportunist,
not caring about the users and the customers enough in the beginning, and just really about creating this fancy story is definitely something like if we would do it again, would save us like 3 years of the journey. And I that's definitely the biggest one. And then
so what's the learning here? The learning is to focus on like delivering the value or be product or being...
Like spend the first 3 months in your customer's office and just sit next to them and see if that piece of software or your solution really solves their problem, and not just the decision maker when you show them a PowerPoint presentation, but really like get into their shoes and create these champions, like do very, very unscalable things to create the first champions and to understand that you really are delivering the value. And the second big learning is like, don't try to scale a business model of which you actually know that it's not complete yet. So like when we did our Series A and we were trying to scale that lead business, we knew that it's actually not where it's supposed to be in terms of product market fit, at least somewhere deep inside of ourselves. And we still raised the money, hired a big sales team of like former Salesforce people, etc. And these poor guys, it wasn't their fault at all. They were just not used selling something that doesn't have product market fit, and that just didn't work out. So really, which is also connected to the first learning, I would say, really make sure you're delivering the value before you start scaling it, which is also somehow like often misaligned incentives, because you just convince these VCs and they're like, dude, you just convinced us, so you now better start spending that money and scaling that business. And you're like, yeah, but maybe
there's no business, but there's no business.
And then, so these are the main learnings, I would say, that definitely would go down very differently if we would do it again from scratch.
Okay.
Maybe okay, Paul. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Maybe we'll do a number 3 episode with Building Radar sometime soon. But could you tell us where we could find out more about you guys?
Well, definitely on our website, buildingradar.com, and on our LinkedIn, we often post a lot of fun stuff that we do with our customers. If you wonder why they always get life-sized beers from us for their workshops, etc., I would say LinkedIn is the best place to follow this.
Life-size beer?
Spears.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. Check out the LinkedIn. All right. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you,
Cheers.
Paul.